In the last video, you learned how to create a variable, or that is to declare a variable. In this video, we're going to pick up where we left off and learn how to initialize a variable. And so that is to give a variable its initial value. Okay, so let's go back. Here's our program from the last video. Before we get too far, I do want to point out just a little something with this variable. I used that as an example just on the fly to show you what camel case would look like with 3 words. But in all reality, I mean, if you asked 100 programmers to name this particular variable, 90 some of them would just call it num oranges. So just want to let you know that if someone saw you call something num of oranges, they'd be like, what are you thinking? Anyway, oh, and we declared more than one variable, so let's put an S there. All right, so we've declared these variables, and down here we showed that this address changes, but here we don't necessarily care about that address anymore, so I'm going to remove that. And again, remember, with this particular line of, don't worry so much about this syntax right now, but with this adjustment, it will output the value. It will output the value of my int. For demonstration here, we're going to use a breakpoint, and let's run this with that breakpoint there. Yes, we want to build it with the changes. Okay, we're at our breakpoint. So this is what I wanted to demonstrate. Now these are both happen to be the same, but these are garbage values. Okay, this is probably just a default value for new memory or something. It doesn't matter what these are. The point is that when you declare a variable, it does have a value, but you don't know where it is, or I mean what it is, or where it came from, and it's of no use to you. And so I'm going to continue to demonstrate something else, at least with the way Visual Studio does. Now, not all compilers will do this, but we'll continue. Exception thrown. So you've got a runtime error here, and the problem is it's saying my int is being used without being initialized. So here with the Visual Studio and its compiler or debugger, it's not going to let you get away with this. Okay, and that's the case with a lot of different IDEs or compilers, debuggers, and so if that's how it can help you find some. If you don't initialize at declaration, that's how it can kind of help you find some potential errors sometimes. All right, but as we said in the course, it's in the course text. It's really a good idea to initialize as it makes sense with your logic. And as you go through the course, you'll kind of see, you know, how that's done. But let's stop here. All right, and our little console screen went away. So there are different ways to initialize a variable. We're going to show you one way that you can do it at declaration. Okay, and then because it's traditional and it's easy to understand, especially when we get a little just a little further, you'll see what I mean. It's consistent. To go into some of these other things, feel free to look those up, but it's just going to keep things a lot more simple to do it this way. But you can initialize at declaration or after declaration. So we're going to first look at initializing at declaration. Now this is just really simple. All you need to do is put an equal sign and the value. We're going to use 0 in this case, and make sure your semicolon is still at the end. Okay, so you want to enter in this equals 0 or whatever value you want to use in between the name and the semicolon. All right, now let's run this again. Okay, it has stopped here, but note now you have a value of 0 here. You still have this garbage value for num oranges because we didn't initialize it, but you have the 0 for my int. And if we continue here, we will no longer have that that runtime error, and you see where it output that value of 0. All right, press any key to continue. That's the end of our program there. All right, now just very quickly, I want to demonstrate something here. That doesn't have to be 0. Typically, if you initialize an integer variable at declaration, that's in the same line that you're declaring it, it's going to be 0, but it really does depend on your logic. But this will work as well. Here you see the value is 5. If we continue, it outputs 5. So it's just that easy to initialize a variable. This is the initialization declaration, and that's some folks, if you're taking this course elsewhere and you're using this for as a study aid or supplemental, or trying to understand what the heck your teacher's talking about or whatever, what have you, your instructor may insist that you always initialize variables here. But again, we feel like sometimes that is a really good idea, but sometimes it makes more sense with your logic to not necessarily do it that way. Okay, now we've done it at declaration. We've initialized at declaration. Now let's see, let's say, all right, well, we've gone through our program somewhere else, everything. We're still uninitialized here, but we want to initialize it. It's already been well declared and everything, so we can use it, but now we're ready to use it, but we need to give it its initial value. So we do that by simply typing the name, my int, and equals, let's say 6 this time, just to make it different. And then make sure your semicolon's at the end. So you notice that it was just like before, except you don't have the type here, and we'll show you why here in just a minute. But this is initializing after your declaration. Okay, let's put another breakpoint here, and we'll go ahead and run it. Now remember, with breakpoints, this breakpoint here, it means it stopped right there where that's blinking. It stops before this line of instruction at the very beginning of it. So this hasn't been executed yet. So you see, you still have the garbage value down here. You still have that garbage value down here. All right, and we'll continue. And so now it's moved to the next line. It executes this, and it's 6. Okay, so just that simple. We'll go ahead and finish with this, and of course it outputs our 6 because that's the value of the variable. Okay, now I did mention that you do not put the type here. This is especially for new programmers, this is a fairly common mistake when folks want to initialize after declaration. They will simply make it look like initializing at declaration. Now take a quick look at this and see if you can figure out why this is not going to work. Okay, let's go through and show you what it says. Okay, it's just going to give you build errors here. No, we don't want to go ahead and use the last one. We want to see what's wrong. Okay, int my int redefinition. All right, it's saying that because what you've got here is you've declared the variable my int. Here, since you've put the type there at int, you're actually trying to declare another variable with the exact same name. And of course that's not going to work, because in your program you're going to use my int to refer to a variable, and you can't have two variables with the same type and the same, well, you can't have them with the same name. Okay, there are places where you can. It's the big thing here is you can't have two variables with the same name. Later on you'll learn about things called scope and lifetime. So you can have two variables with the same name as long as they're in a different scope, but we're not even going to touch that for right now. Just remember, you can't have two variables with the same name, because your program doesn't know which one you're talking about whenever you try to use it. Okay, and here you see when you tried to compile, it said yeah, well, you can't do that. So that kind of, if you see this, you know that's what you've tried to do. And I did want to point that out, because I've seen that with new programmers fairly often, enough that it sticks out in my mind as something that can be a problem. So this whole thing will make a tad bit more sense when we get to the next video, when we look at assignment. Okay, let me make sure this is all good and saved, and I'll close this. And so we'll see you in that video where we look at assignment, that is changing the values of your variable. This concludes another video for Introduction to Programming with C++, brought to you by LogiKomp. You can access the full course by going to the course homepage at logikomp.com/introcpp. While we are proud to offer this course free of cost to individuals, we do ask that if you continue to use the course, that you support its production and maintenance by making at least a small purchase from LogiKomp Domains and Hosting. You can pick up a custom domain, renewable annually, for around $10 at logikomp.com/hosting. Thank you.